story of an 84-year-old woman who vanished from one of the safest neighborhoods in America. On the morning of February 1st, 2026, a small church congregation in Tucson, Arizona, noticed something unusual. A seat in the pew was empty. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, had not shown up, and Nancy always showed up. Rain or shine, good days or bad days, she was there. Her friends waited. They called her phone. No answer. And when someone finally drove to her home in the Catalina foothills, one of the most affluent, quiet, tucked-away neighborhoods in the entire state, the front door was open. Nancy was gone. Now, to understand why this disappearance sent shockwaves far beyond Tucson, you need to know two things. First, Nancy Guthrie was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognized news anchors in America, the face of NBC's Today show for over a decade. Second, this was not a random break-in, not even close. What investigators found inside that home told a very different story. A story of planning, of patience, of someone who had chosen Nancy Guthrie long before that night. Let me take you back to the evening of January 31st. Sometime after dark, a figure appeared near Nancy's front door. FBI footage released weeks later showed a man, armed, masked, wearing gloves, approaching her doorbell camera. He didn't ring the bell. He tampered with it, deliberately, carefully, like he knew exactly what he was doing. But that wasn't the only thing he'd prepared for. A utility box near the property had been damaged earlier, cutting internet service to the surrounding area. Security cameras in the neighborhood went dark. Footage that might have captured a vehicle, a face, a direction of travel, all of it, wiped out before the crime even began. Inside the home, investigators found signs of a struggle. There were bloodstains. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Nancy, but Nancy herself was nowhere to be found. And here's what makes this case especially haunting. Nancy Guthrie could barely walk. On a good day, getting to her mailbox was a painful effort. She suffered from severe, chronic back pain. She wasn't someone who could run. She wasn't someone who could fight back. Whoever took her knew that. And that detail matters more than you might think. In the study of targeted abductions, criminologists have long noted a specific pattern when it comes to elderly victims. The perpetrator almost always selects someone with limited mobility, someone isolated, someone whose daily routine is predictable. They don't stumble into these crimes. They study the target. They know when the lights go off. They know who visits and when. They know the weaknesses of the security setup. And in Nancy's case, they knew exactly how to blind every digital eye in the neighborhood before making their move. Within days of the disappearance, multiple ransom notes began arriving at media outlets. Not at the family's home, at newsrooms. The demands were for cryptocurrency, untraceable, digital, anonymous. 2 separate deadlines were set. Both passed, no payment was made, and critically, no proof of life was ever provided. That absence told investigators something they didn't want to hear. In kidnapping cases where ransom is demanded but proof of life is never offered, the statistical outcomes are grim. The ransom becomes a distraction, not a negotiation, a way to buy time, a way to misdirect. But the investigation pushed forward. A person of interest was detained near the U.S.-Mexico border in Rio Rico, roughly 60 miles south of Tucson. They were questioned and then released. No charges were filed. Meanwhile, cadaver dogs that had been deployed in the search were quietly stood down. DNA evidence collected from the scene was sent for processing through forensic genetic genealogy, a technique that has cracked some of the most notorious cold cases in recent years. But results take time. And time in this case feels like it's running out. The FBI posted a reward of $100,000. The Guthrie family raised it to $1 million. $1 million for any information that leads to Nancy. And still, silence. Now, this is where the case takes on a deeper, more uncomfortable dimension. Why target the mother of a celebrity? Criminologists are divided. Some argue the high-profile connection was a tactical mistake, a miscalculation by someone who thought fame meant wealth and compliance, that the family would quietly pay and the story would go away. But others suggest something darker, that the celebrity connection was intentional, that it was part of the point, that in an age of constant media attention, some perpetrators seek the spotlight itself as a kind of power. The chaos, the headlines, the fear, it becomes the reward, not the ransom. What we do know is this: 8 weeks have passed. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. The investigation remains active, but the family has begun to publicly acknowledge the possibility that Nancy may already be gone. In an emotional interview airing this week on The Today Show, Savannah Guthrie spoke about the unimaginable weight of not knowing. She described waking in the middle of the night, lying in the darkness, imagining what her mother went through. It is the kind of grief that has no resolution, no closure to hold on to, just silence and waiting. And that is perhaps the cruelest dimension of cases like this. For the families left behind, the disappearance never ends. There is no final chapter, no courtroom, no verdict. Just an open door and an empty seat in a church pew. The people who plan these crimes understand that. They weaponize uncertainty. They know that not knowing is its own kind of suffering. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is ongoing. DNA evidence is still being processed. The FBI has asked anyone with information to come forward. The reward stands at over $1 million. And somewhere, the answer to what happened that night exists. It's out there. Hidden in a detail someone noticed but hasn't yet reported. Buried in a connection that hasn't yet been made. This story was never really about what happened that night. It was about the red threads, the disabled cameras, the damaged utility box, the ransom notes sent to newsrooms instead of family, the careful, deliberate choosing of a woman who couldn't fight back. Most people saw a missing person case, but the details told a different story. A story of patience, of planning, of someone who studied every weakness before they ever stepped through that door. That's what we do here. We follow the red threads, one case at a time, one story at a time. If that's something you want to be a part of, subscribe to the Red Threads. The next story is already waiting.